Thanks so much for joining us today. Before we get too far along, we'd love for you to let us know in the chat stream what school or department you're from, or just say hello. If you have any questions or comments, you again use the chat. We've left some time at the end of the presentation to answer questions. My name is Barbara Schweikert. I'm one of your presenters today. I have my bachelor's degree in communication and my master's in education for education and counseling psychology. I'm a certified K-12 school counselor with most of my experience at a private high school here in Louisville. I began just in January with JCPS as a mental health practitioner in the early childhood department. My home location is Dawson-Orman, but I also serve at McFerrin, Norton Commons, Unseld, and the Westport Early Childhood Centers. I'm learning a lot about working with this young student population, but have come really to realize how much my skill set and counseling experience cross over a lot of just human barriers, regardless of age or development level. My co-presenter is Donna Early. Donna, you want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Thanks, Barbara. Good afternoon, everyone. My name's Donna Early. I'm also an early childhood mental health practitioner, and I'm based at the Duval Education Center. However, I also serve the early childhood programs located at Hazelwood, Alex R. Kennedy, Maupin, and Shacklet. Here's a little background information about me. I received my master's from and completed my doctoral coursework at the University of Louisville in their counseling psychology program. I've been a licensed professional clinical counselor in the state of Kentucky since 2002. As a licensed counselor, I've worked with a variety of clientele in a variety of settings. I was the director at Spring Meadows for several years. That's a residential treatment facility for boys. I'm really happy to be here with you this afternoon. So let's get started, shall we? Barbara will begin the presentation. Barbara?
Thanks, Donna. Today we're talking about early childhood development with a focus and perspective from mental health professionals. I'll start today with some basic development domains for preschool students. It's important as we cover this information to acknowledge that individual students progress through their development on their very own timeline. These are highly individual processes. Students might fall behind in one area while they get ahead in others. Human development is on a continuum where all of the domains are interrelated. I'll discuss how the domains work and rely on each other a little more within each domain. The five domains I'll discuss today are adaptive, cognitive, motor, speech and language, and social emotional. So we're going to dive right in. The adaptive self-help domain is one that makes it easy to demonstrate how interrelated the developmental tasks are. Those are the skills that children really do day to day. They're independence building life skills. Things like children dressing themselves, tying their shoes, potty training, washing their hands, and using utensils to eat. All of those tasks require increasing ability with fine motor skills. Also in this domain is taking personal responsibility and following safety and classroom rules. For example, walking in a line, putting toys away, and remaining in the classroom. This requires cognitive and language ability too. Students have to understand the rules as communicated to them and remember the rules in order to follow them. Cognitive development. This is what a lot of people think about when they learn that 90% of brain development happens before age 5. It's this domain that many of our parents worry about. It can be where comparisons where other students take place, but let me emphasize again, each individual student has their own developmental timeline. During these years, attention span increases. A typical 3-year-old might have an attention span of anywhere from 3 to 8 minutes for an activity that is new or interesting to them, while a 5-year-old might stretch that up to 15 or 20 minutes. Preschool students are sort of notoriously off task, and that in and of itself does not indicate a problem. A shorter attention span might just show that it's a skill they're still developing. They might need a lot of redirection to keep them going on one thing. Their memory will become longer and more detailed. I've been with a student who appeared to be reading a book, but actually had it memorized word for word and could recall every word as he turned the pages. This was impressive from a memory standpoint, but not the same skills as actual reading. Imagination becomes more developed. During this time, students might report more about remembering their dreams or even have night terrors. And that's their brain integrating this new area of imaginative development while they sleep. They can now distinguish between a stuffed animal and a real animal, but would use their imagination to play with the stuffed version as if it were real. Problem solving comes more into play. Climbing obstacles to get something they want, even if they're not supposed to have it, or negotiating ways to get a toy from a friend are examples of problem solving. Classification by sorting, matching, and identifying things based on shape, color, or type becomes more consistent. This even includes understanding and classifying the difference between a truth and a lie. Students through this period also constantly question and seek to understand more about the world around them. The question why, over and over, can be frustrating, but it's an indicator of their development, curiosity, and wanting to learn. Another thing to keep in mind with students cognitively at this age is how their sense of time is not developed yet. If you ask them to wait just for a minute, they don't have a concrete idea of how long that is. So when they share a story from their past, it could have happened yesterday or a month ago. They're very likely to confuse their timelines. For motor development, the fine motor skills are the tasks we perform with small muscle coordination, primarily with our hands and fingers. Things like using scissors, holding and using a crayon or marker, buttoning and zipping clothes, and turning the pages in a book. Students at this age are discovering if they're left or right-handed for different tasks. Maybe they throw a ball with their left hand, but use a crayon or marker with their right hand. These skills take time and practice, and early childhood students are at many levels of ability with their fine motor skills. These all take practice and patience to improve. The gross motor skills develop earlier than fine motor and involve the larger muscles in the body and coordination. Walking and running, climbing, kicking, balance, and jumping. Having unstructured gross motor opportunities, whether that's on a playground, in a yard, or any somewhat open area, even indoors, where they aren't a danger to the environment, is important for a child's development. These physical skills are not only for strength and endurance, but are avenues to further develop their focus, persistence, and resilience. There are even proven strong correlations between gross motor development and all other areas of development, even reading. And speaking of reading, speech and language development. This domain is strongly linked to cognitive development. The ability to communicate begins with nonverbal skills, so pointing at things or using sounds and facial expressions to make needs clear. Development over this domain includes listening and following directions. As those listening skills develop, verbal instructions can include more steps. As an example, games can be more complicated, but still be followed. Students now will begin to learn to speak in complete, simple sentences. They're learning sentence structure from what they hear, so they're developing correct and consistent use of pronouns and verb tense. Their vocabulary is increasing exponentially. They'll recognize rhyming words and use most speech sounds. One of the best ways for students to continue their growth with language is for adults to model appropriate speech when talking with them. Talk plainly, use full sentences, make eye contact. It's common for children to mispronounce words or be difficult to understand when they speak because they're still developing. With reading, they're drawing meaning from both pictures and text and integrating the idea that the alphabet forms words and words are used to communicate. They'll begin learning and using the alphabet over these years and writing their name. All the communication skills, listening, speaking, reading, and writing, interrelate with each other, and with cognitive development, development to make sense of language. Students become better able to follow stories and to tell their own. On social emotional development, this is where mental health practitioners would be the most involved. It's in this domain where we see not all, but a lot of behavior issues in the classroom. Working and playing with others is an incredible skill for students to learn. They're moving from solitary play to cooperative play. They're building their understanding of sharing and taking turns. And this is dependent on those communication skills we had in the last slide. Students will display increasing empathy. Empathy is one way we can help them use their words to solve problems, rather than physical reactions like biting or kicking other people. Now, for empathy to develop, they need to be able to recognize and name their emotions, both in other people and in themselves, and relate the two together. It's easier to see a picture of a sad face and call it sad than to recognize sadness in yourself at this age. Vocabulary regarding emotions will also develop and should be encouraged. Learning and using words like frustrated, annoyed, angry, or furious helps them learn about different levels of emotion, which helps to learn with regulating bigger emotions. One great way we use to help students develop better self-regulation is through mindfulness. Tuning into themselves when they're calm will, over time and with practice, help them tune into themselves when their emotions are getting away from them. I'm going to bring up a point here about not just self-regulation, but co-regulation. Children take a lot of their cues from the adults around them. If our own emotions are heightened, it is that much more difficult to work with an emotional child. Never hesitate to take a minute to calm yourself. Explain to the student that that's what you're doing. At that point, you're really modeling good things for them to emulate. Self-confidence develops during these preschool years. They'll take pride in their work and want to share. They might seem to even brag and try to one-up their peers. A normal part of development during this time also is increasing autonomy and independence. They want to pick which game to play and who is which character, pick out their own clothes, or make decisions about food and meals. Allow them, within reason, to make or contribute to the decisions that affect them. It's one way to build trust and increase their self-confidence. So some of the ways that mental health practitioners help students are through crisis management. That's when a student is unable to function in their moment. We can assist with de-escalation and helping a student find their calm. We might conduct in-class observations. We're never used to judge a teacher, but just to help identify triggers to behavior, whether those are things in the environment, with peers, or just with their emotional development. We conduct individual and group sessions with students. This involves a lot of play therapy, building relationships with the students, and goal setting. Group sessions would be small groups that meet together for a short shared activity. We can also provide education to parents, provide outside resources when needed, and build that relationship with families to affect positive change for their student. That's all of the development part. I'm going to turn it over to Donna.
Thank you, Barbara. When Barbara and I establish a therapeutic relationship with one of our preschool students, ideally, we will also have established relationships with the child's parents and or guardian, with the teachers and the administrators that work directly with that child. I've had teachers ask me, what can I do in the classroom to help the child that you're working with? Following, I made up 3 case studies. These are not real children. But these 3 children would have been referred to the school mental health practitioner. First, I'm going to talk about the presenting problems, and then I'm going to offer some suggestions of how the teacher might implement classroom strategies, which would complement the work that we as doing. First case, Janie, she is 4 years old. Past year, both of her killed in an automobile accident.
Hey, Barbara, I think we're losing Donna. I don't know if she sounds a little odd to you.
She does.
But certainly a little bit odd to me. I think she seems a little frozen now also.
Okay, well, I can go on with the case about Janie.
Thank you.
Absolutely. So within the past year, as it says, both of her parents were killed in an automobile accident. So she lives with her maternal grandmother. In class, the teacher noticed she has difficulty concentrating on tasks and she's easily startled. Sometimes she's clingy and whiny. She appears to be withdrawn and at times is irritable with her classmates. At other times, she seems perfectly fine. So some of the classroom strategies would be, and they're listed there, we'll read together. Establish a feeling of safety and acceptance within the classroom. You'll want to greet Janie warmly each day, make eye contact, and let them know that they're valued and that you care. You'll want to provide consistent, predictable routine throughout each day as much as possible. A regular schedule helps to establish or reestablish and maintain a sense of normalcy and security in the child's life. If the schedule is going to change, explain beforehand what will be different and why. That consistency shows children that you're in control of the situation. You want to allow them choices whenever possible. That helps them have a sense of some control and helps to build their self-confidence. And don't hesitate to interrupt activities and avoid circumstances that are upsetting to the child. Watch for increased symptoms during or following certain situations to prevent those from being repeated. Again, you're looking for triggers for Janie. Excuse me. Case 2, this would be Mark. Mark is 3. He's angry most of the time. He's quick to blame other students when mistakes are made, and he acts in a negative, vindictive, and hostile way. He argues with his teachers. He's defiant and refuses to comply with requests. He doesn't have many friends in the class, and his behaviors alienate him from his peers. So it is difficult for him to learn or develop positive relationships. So strategies for the classroom would be: do not engage in power struggles with this student. You state your position clearly and concisely and avoid verbal exchanges. Choose your battles wisely. If it's something you can let go, try to let it go. It helps to give 2 choices when decisions are needed. State them briefly and clearly. Establish clear classroom rules and be clear and know what is actually non-negotiable. Post the daily schedule so students know what to expect. You'll want to praise students when they respond positively. A lot of positive reinforcement going on. Provide consistency, structure, and clear consequences for the student's behavior. Again, we'll want to teach Mark for sure social skills, including anger management, conflict resolution strategies, and how to be assertive in a proper manner. Discuss strategies with the students that they can use to calm themselves when they're angry or escalating. And this is important, and I talked about it earlier with in development, that co-regulation piece. You always want to teach the strategies when the student is calm and make sure that you calm yourself first. And case 3.
I'm back, Barbara. Can you hear me?
Hello, Donna. Thank you.
I'm not sure how long. Thank you. I apologize.
No, you're fine.
No, it happens. That's the nature of our teaching now.
Yes, it is. Our third case is Allie, and she's 5 years old. Allie is always sad. She participates in classroom activities reluctantly and never appears to enjoy them. She's often irritable with her classmates and her teachers, and she has outbursts of anger. She's sensitive to criticism, and she cries easily. She also often complains of somatic issues such as stomach aches and headaches. She has difficulty concentrating, has a hard time completing tasks, and is quiet and disengaged. With Allie, you want to help her use realistic and positive statements about her performance and her outlook for the future. Break her tasks into smaller parts so they're not overwhelming. You want to help her recognize and acknowledge positive contributions that she makes and positive performance. Allie and most children this age are going to see issues in black and white terms. They may see their actions as all good or all bad. You want to keep a record of her accomplishments that you can show her. Finally, you want to encourage social interaction, and maybe start that with having her join small groups. Next, please. As we've seen, preschool children may present with a variety of problems that may indicate for the need for mental health intervention. Because we're talking about presenting issues at this point in the presentation, it's important to remind everyone of the signs of child abuse and neglect. We have to remember that home is not always a safe place for children. In the most recent report from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, sadly, Kentucky, for the second year in a row, leads the nation in cases of child abuse and neglect. Did you know that teachers and other educators account for 20% of the reports filed nationwide alleging potential child abuse? When I worked in a residential treatment setting, our census was always lowest when children were out of school for the summer. Once school started back, within a couple of weeks, we began getting referrals from all over the state. That was because you were back in session and teachers and administrators were back on the front lines. I'm going to give you one more statistic. During the first week of school in March, after we closed, reports to CPS declined 30% in Kentucky. That doesn't mean the abuse stopped, folks. It means that the abuse is not being reported. Please keep in mind these lists are not all inclusive, and it's also important to note that the issues in these lists are not necessarily signs of abuse, and they can occur for other reasons. I'm not going to read the slides to you. Instead, we're going to give you a moment to look at them. The first slide you're going to see are signs of physical or sexual abuse. Next, in the next, the signs of emotional abuse and signs of neglect are presented. If you need more information, you're going to find it. You can find it on our JCPS website or at your schools. But I want to emphasize, if you're not sure, report. Next, please. Okay. This has been a stressful time for everyone, and we're going to continue to be, it's going to continue to be stressful into the future. But eventually, we really are going to go back in the classroom. I believe it. When we return to the classroom, we should expect to see many of our students exhibiting symptoms of trauma as a result of the loss of family members, economic hardship, and anxiety about their own health and well-being. On 6th, there was an article that Mike Marcy with the Kentucky Department of Education wrote. It was entitled, "The KDE Will Prioritize Students' Academic Mental Health Needs When School Opens." In this article, Marcy quotes Damian Sweeney, who is the KDE's program coordinator for comprehensive school counseling. Mr. Sweeney says, "Our content classes can't just be about content. The classes have to start with being psychologically supportive. They should infuse social and emotional learning. We need to know that these kids aren't going to come back ready to learn. They're going to come back wanting to feel safe and wanting that sense of community. Remember, we as educators may be the only people who can help these students learn what a healthy, supportive relationship feels like. Building relational trust involves simple teaching practices such as smiling, sharing parts of your life with your students, getting to know your students as individuals, and using yourself as a role model of a reliable and regulated adult." Next, please. Relationships are important. Positive relationships are important for all of our students, but especially for our students that have been affected by some type of trauma. For those students, a positive connection or relationship with others is the first step toward healing. However, remember, all of our students, with everyone, a healthy relationship is often the therapy. That's the end of our presentation. We have references in the last slide. Does anyone have any questions?